have two more quick items. 10E, adopt resolutions authorizing the city manager to execute contracts for engineering and surveying services for the Crestmoor Glenview Neighborhood Reconstruction Project for a total of $172,671.
Chump change.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council. My name's Harry Burrows, and I'm the city's project manager for the Crestmoor Glenview reconstruction effort. Purpose of tonight's meeting is really twofold. One is to bring forth these contracts and contract amendments for 3 engineering consulting firms whose services are required as part of the reconstruction efforts. And the second is to provide the City Council with a preview of some future information that staff will be bringing forward in a subsequent meeting seeking policy direction. The reconstruction effort in the Crestmoor Glenview neighborhood requires the expertise of multiple engineering and professional firms. Unfortunately, there's not a single firm that possesses all of the necessary expertise for these reconstruction efforts. In order to make informed decisions regarding the extent and the magnitude of the reconstruction, the city needs additional information that these professionals will provide. The contracts before the City Council tonight, if approved, will result in additional data and analysis to help make these informed decisions. For example, how much of the water and sewer system ultimately should be replaced in the neighborhood? How much storm drainage, what extent of storm drain facilities should we replace above and beyond that was immediately damaged in the events of last year? Another question that needs to be answered is, what is the feasibility of undergrounding the overhead utilities? All of these items will be part of the future action or future item that staff will be bringing forward to the council seeking direction on. The first contract before you tonight is with Treadwell Rollo, geotechnical engineers. They were contracted immediately after the fire to provide expertise related to slope stability recommendations, the retaining wall replacements that were damaged in the fire, and provide design recommendations for the slope stability. They also provided limited field observation during construction. Their original contract was for $72,000. Due to field conditions and the nature of the work last winter during the rainy season, Treadwell Rollo was required to be on site during the ongoing construction. In performing this critical work, an additional $45,000 in expenses was incurred. Future work that staff is recommending Treadwell and Rollo perform includes monitoring of the erosion control measures that are in place out in the field, slope stability of the canyon, as well as remedial work that they recommend going forward. Additionally, we've asked them to asking them to provide recommendations and plan review for projects that affect the canyon, including some drainage improvements that we're considering as well. The estimated fee for these additional work we're asking for is $20,500, which brings a total contract amendment to about $65,500. Staff recommends that the council approve this contract amendment. The second contract before you tonight is with Wilsey & Ham. They are surveying and engineering firm. Wilsey & Ham initially provided surveying services in the damaged areas immediately after the fire and after the demolition work occurred. That information was important. It provided topographical information for the folks that are rebuilding their homes, as well as reestablishment of the property corners that are out there. This drawing that I'm showing now indicates the extent of the original Wilsey & Ham topographic mapping effort. It was limited to this area because at the time this was where the impacts were, and we weren't really thinking beyond that in terms of looking at additional improvements and additional feasibility of improvements to be constructed out there. It's important going forward in terms of that feasibility analysis because the topographical information provides the base map that we use for the ongoing analysis. So staff is recommending that contract be executed with Wilsey and Ham in the amount of $40,600 to perform this additional surveying work.
I'm sorry, before we go off this slide, can you, you said the area is indicated here, but which color did you say indicates?
I'm sorry, the area that's outlined roughly in yellow here.
Okay.
So that's the area of their original survey effort.
And the proposed area is the entire
The
neighborhood?
proposed area would include all the way up to Sneath and all the way down to San Bruno Avenue.
Thank you.
And then the third contract before you this evening is with Power Systems Design. They're an electrical engineering and dry utility consulting firm. Staff sought proposals from 3 dry utility consultants for this work. The work involves performing feasibility analysis for the undergrounding of the overhead utilities, as well as streetlight design services. The firms that we sought proposals from included Giacalone Associates and RGA Utility Consulting. Staff determined that Power Systems Design was the most qualified firm for the work. The feasibility analysis will include looking at not only costs, but also logistics and the impacts to the residents, impacts to the streets, impacts to other utilities, the overall costs, as well as a summary of the advantages and disadvantages of performing this underground work. The results of the feasibility analysis will give staff information to make recommendations to you, the City Council, regarding full or partial undergrounding of these utilities. The second part of their proposal is to perform design of the replacement streetlight systems should Council direct staff to proceed with this work. And what this work would involve would be a replacement of the entire streetlight system within the whole neighborhood. And I think as everyone is aware, the existing system that's out there is an old series system. It's plagued with maintenance and frequent malfunction issues. So a new system would be much more reliable and much more energy efficient. The third aspect of their contract is to actually perform the undergrounding work in its entirety, the design work. That portion of it, staff is not recommending that we go forward with at this point in time. We're recommending that just the feasibility analysis and the streetlight design be a part of the contract that gets approved this evening. And that is a dollar amount of $66,500. And as I stated previously, sometime within the next 60 days or so, staff will be returning to the council to present a summary of recommendations for infrastructure rebuilding, including incorporating and factoring in the information from these firms. It will also include a listing of issues that we'll seek policy direction from the council on, as well as budget and timing impacts of those recommendations. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Any questions of staff?
I'm just assuming that this is, really pressing right now, that we have to make a determination. You have to get these studies so that if we decide to do the undergrounding, we probably want to do that right away,
Yeah, the undergrounding...
sooner than later.
Yeah. The undergrounding obviously involves putting additional conduits and utilities within the streets that we're trying to shoehorn a lot of other potential utilities in as well. So understanding whether we want to proceed with the undergrounding is a critical decision to be made sooner than later.
And we don't want to improve the streets and all the infrastructure, surface infrastructure, and then open it up again.
That is
later on.
correct.
Any other questions? Or action?
Actually, I do have some questions.
Michael?
I was wondering if maybe you could briefly explain a little bit about the variance in the Treadwell and Rollo contract, because that was a pretty significant variance over the original budget. So maybe just expand a little bit on what's in the report.
Well, maybe I'll defer that question to you, Clara.
The main difference between the initial estimate and the final cost for that contract was the expert presence on the site during the construction of the wall. that initially the estimate was that that time dedicated for on-site inspection will be less than how, in fact, they needed to be on site. They needed to be on site anytime when the contractor performed any work on the canyon, considering the time of the year that the construction itself took place during the rainy winter season, was the expectation for the geotechnical expert to be on site to make sure that all of the work will be done in a diligent manner without to impact unnecessarily the stability of the whole canyon.
And why didn't we know ahead of time that that sort of supervision was going to be required?
It was known from the beginning that the supervision will be required. I think just was the estimation was lower versus the time needed, and also the construction time of the wall itself was a little bit longer than how was our expectation, how long time will take until the construction will be done. I just want to point out that overall, the cost of the overall project cost, including the construction of the walls and the support from the geotechnical consultant, is less than with 32,000 than how much the initial estimate was.
And we always
That
like to come in under budget.
this specific contract is higher than how was the estimate. But if you are adding all the initial estimate and the final cost for all of the slope stabilization and the work done, including the walls and the canyon, the overall cost is below our estimate with about 30,000.
Okay. And I had a couple more questions. I'm just going to skip over to the lighting one. And it seems that if we were to decide to do this undergrounding thing, it's going to be extremely disruptive to the entire neighborhood, and the amount of the infrastructure that needs to be replaced in order to make the neighborhood, put it back to the way it was, would be a pretty minimal amount of that. And my understanding is that the public's response to suggesting of doing that was cool at best. So it wasn't something that the community was really excited about doing. So I'm wondering why we're even considering that at this point.
Well, I think that there has been some interest expressed by the public, although maybe not an overwhelming majority. I think the real issue is, if we are going to consider it, now is the time to consider it. So, we have this window of opportunity, and like you said, there are advantages, but there are disadvantages as well. And I think now's the time to flush those to the surface and make that determination, because as was said earlier, in the future, once the road is paved, we don't want to be going back in there and tearing up the roadway to put in conduits and doing underground work. Okay.
And is there any other benefit to doing that study that we can then extrapolate to the rest of the city? Or is this study going to be so specific that it's only going to be applicable to this neighborhood?
No, I certainly think there will be information that will come out of this that we can extrapolate to other portions of the city. There's really two distinct instances when you do undergrounding. Some undergrounding is when the utilities are in the street. The poles are, facing the street. In this neighborhood, they're in the backyard, so it's a slightly different, but it's certainly the base information. It certainly can be used other places.
Okay, thank you.
Through the chair, Vice Mayor asked great questions, some that I was thinking myself, but what is the time frame? So the undergrounding we know takes longer, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and I know our concern also was the movement and the progress of the neighborhood and being able to keep up and make sure that folks can move back into their homes. So will this report also give us that timeline, or is there some estimate that you may have as what one versus the other as far as time?
Well, obviously, you know, one of the things that they're going to be looking at is partial undergrounding. We've got portions of the neighborhood that obviously are undergoing the rebuilding efforts right now, and then we've got the other portions of the neighborhood that are, you know, the established portion. So the feasibility analysis is going to look into undergrounding in both areas. Does it make sense to underground in just the areas that are getting rebuilt now versus the entire neighborhood? You know, what are the pros and cons of that? What are the pros and cons of staging some of the undergrounding to match the phasing of the infrastructure?
Okay. And then finally, will kind of give us a bigger picture as far as the disruption that it can cause to the rest of the area.
Correct. One of the things that will come out of this is that not only the disruption to the streets, but the disruption to each individual home, because you have to take that service that's overhead from the back and now go from the street underground along the side of the house, in many instances going through existing landscaping, hardscape, and other things. So that will be part of this feasibility analysis as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Any action?
I'd like to introduce the resolution to approve all three contracts.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Aye.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Ruane.
Aye.